Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo, and I'm here today to bring you guys my final thoughts, essentially my review of Quantum Break, the latest franchise from Remedy Games, the same wonderful team that created Alan Wake and Max Payne. Now, I've attempted to keep this video as spoiler-free as possible. You're only going to be seeing combat and core gameplay video footage. There's going to be no storytelling, no character interaction, no cutscenes, none of that stuff, because Quantum Break is a very heavily story-focused experience. I wouldn't want to spoil that for anyone. However, I will spoil all of the combat and all of the time-focused abilities for you, so, because you just have to spoil that stuff. It's impossible, otherwise I'd just be showing you a blank screen. So, let me preface this whole thing by saying, Remedy Games. I mean, come on, guys. Most of us out there, I think, have a very big soft spot for Remedy. They've always delivered amazing experiences that have been able to do a sort of 50-50 split on great gameplay, action-oriented gameplay and gunplay, as well as storytelling. So I went into Quantum Break with a certain set of expectations, Remedy Games focused expectations. As someone who grew up with Max Payne and fell in love with Alan Wake, I really wanted Quantum Break to, to be another outstanding experience from the team at Remedy. I wanted to remember Jack Joyce. I wanted to look forward to more from this universe. And in short, they delivered. Quantum Break isn't perfect by any means, and in fact, it has some flaws that I was immensely frustrated with while playing the experience, but the rest of the game just held together so well. The overall presentation, all in all, at the end of the day, is so utterly fantastic that I do believe in the future, when you're talking to other people and, they're sitting down like, yeah, man, I really, I'd like to get into some Remedy game stuff. I always hear you talking about that game, Alan Wake. What else should I play for them? Well, you got to play Max Payne, and you have to play Quantum Break, man. That was their latest, and that's a real good one, I do feel that this will, fall in line in the library of great Remedy games. There's no doubt about that. And Quantum Break does a lot of Remedy things. Remedy sort of has their formula for things that they just always do, regardless of what game they're crafting. You look at Max Payne and you look at Alan Wake, really two different experiences, but there are driving forces that are very similar, and that is the case with Quantum Break. So to make a reference regarding Quantum Break's combat, which is where I want to start talking about the game. We're going to talk about the story, we're going to talk about the characters and how all of that was delivered. We're not going to spoil anything, but we're going to talk about the delivery, we're going to talk about the presentation. But I do feel it's important to start talking about the core gameplay, the combat, the gunplay, and the time shift abilities, because obviously that's a huge part of the experience. Now, if you look back at Max Payne, the combat itself was broken into two components. You had the actual gunplay and the bullet time mechanic. In Alan Wake, you had the gunplay and the flashlight mechanic. In the case of Quantum Break, you have the gunplay and the time shift mechanic. It's just kind of a Remedy Games thing to make sure that the combat always has two components to it. They've done that here. But Quantum Break is the first time that I feel Remedy has fallen short in the gunplay department. I love what they've done with the time shift abilities, and frankly, they save the overall combat experience in Quantum Break. But the gunplay just doesn't feel right. It's not satisfying. It's not nearly as satisfying as anything in Max Payne or anything in Alan Wake, and that frustrated me a little bit, especially considering there were certain situations where I felt like I was fighting against the weapon handling. It never feels 100% precise. It never feels tight. It always feels a bit loose. No matter how much I messed with the sensitivity and the different assist options, I always felt like I was fighting against that. And more often than not, I was unable to get into those combat situations where I was really flowing my combat with my time shift abilities, which is really what I wanted to do. I wanted to have those moments where I'm, using my time dash and my time rush and then using my slow motion out of my time, rush to land a headshot. I mean, those situations occurred, and there were a few of the combat scenarios where it really came together for me, and I had a big smile on my face. I'm like, yes, this is how it should feel throughout the entire game. But the overall weapon handling decisions, the way they handled recoil with the different firearms, I think just, helps to further bring down that core gunplay. It just never really felt as satisfying, and it was never as consistently as satisfying as I had hoped it would be, especially from Remedy. They definitely fell short in that department for one reason or another. But as I said, the time shift abilities genuinely saved the day. And rather Startlingly, the time shift abilities didn't really work in the way that I thought they were going to. You know, when they first showcased them and I was seeing a lot of the gameplay, I thought they were going to be superpowers. You know, superpowers for a guy who's really just an ordinary dude, but they're not. There are some situations where you're genuinely able to overwhelm the enemy, especially earlier on in the game. But as you progress through the game, your time powers become less of superpowers and more of survival tools. You know, and I think I'm really happy with this decision, actually, from Remedy. You know, it would have been very easy to make Jack Joyce feel like, you know, the sort of just every man turned into a superhero, which, yes, that's been done 1,000 times before. But that's not really in the tradition of Remedy Games game design. You know, Max Payne and Alan Wake were always about the player having to survive using their abilities. The player was always overwhelmed by whatever enemy force they were dealing with. You know, if you faltered for just a second in Max Payne in your ability to deploy bullet time and to navigate an environment, you would die almost instantly. Max Payne was a hard-hitting game. Enemies died quickly, and you died quickly. And the same thing could be said for Alan Wake. You know, enemies could easily overwhelm you. It really forced you to make the best use of your abilities. Now, in Quantum Break, enemies overwhelm you, not just through numbers, but because they take a lot of bullets. It's a bit of an odd decision, I have to say. I didn't expect to have to pump like 40 rounds into the standard Monarch Trooper, but it enables and requires the player to then make use of their time shift abilities to eliminate the enemies. So I can understand the design decision, and I think at the end of the day, it was the right one. And it is really satisfying when you are in these awful situations. You've got multiple enemy types, which I really appreciate. You know, you've got like the heavy gunners, and you got the guys who actually have chrono disruptors, so essentially they can break down and disable your time shift abilities. You're dealing with these different enemy types while making use of those time abilities or attempting to re-enable them, and that's where the satisfaction comes from. It comes from that forced survival element. And when that all falls into place and you use your abilities to dodge, you know, 3 different grenades, wipe out an enemy, and then enable, you know, your time warp shield to just stop a sniper bullet from tearing your head off, that's really rewarding, and that is what saves the combat. That's what saves the subpar gunplay. So props to them with the time shift abilities. They really did an outstanding job with that. Now, the gameplay goes outside of just shooting guys. There are several situations and scenarios in Quantum Break where you're dealing with giant ruptures in time. There are small platforming sections that require you to make use of your abilities to navigate them in one piece. And they're a welcome break from the combat and the storytelling. In fact, I wish there was more of them, because there's only several large ones, and they are really great demonstrations of all of the work that's been done in the audio-visual department to portray the idea of time breaking down. You know, that's probably one of the coolest things about Quantum Break is the portrayal of the time shift abilities and the idea of all these different time ruptures. And it's the fact that Remedy just nailed it, man. Like, huge props to everyone who is in the design department, audio, visual, you know, effects, animations wise, who brought all of that to life, because you genuinely feel like time is breaking down around you, like time is in a state of flux, like you're manipulating it. And that's a really awesome experience. In fact, those giant ruptures that you have to deal with, much like the one in the bridge that you guys are seeing, genuinely feel scary. You know, the sound effects alone, you know, are just, they're kind of like monsters. It's as if time itself is alive and it's really pissed off. And I really appreciated that. I really enjoyed that. It was a really fun part of the experience to actually feel like time was unpredictable. You know, it's all, you know, it's all preordained. It's all set up. It's scripted. You know, when you get to a certain part on the bridge, this is going to break down, so on and so forth. You know that it's scripted because that's how the game works. But the way in which they designed time and the animation and all of the effects and the particle work that went into, you know, creating the effects themselves makes it feel unpredictable. It feels like it could happen at any moment. And that definitely adds to the experience. I really appreciated that. It was a huge part of why I enjoyed Quantum Break so much from beginning to end. Now, from a more basic perspective, audio-visually, Quantum Break is a bit of a masterpiece in my opinion. This is one of the best looking games I've ever played. The level of detail on everything is insane, man. Particularly the character models. Jack Joyce everyone you encounter, enemy or otherwise, main character or otherwise, is incredibly detailed. The motion capture that they did for the characters has gone a long way. The game really comes to life in that respect, and I really appreciate all of the smaller details, like the fact that Jack Joyce's jacket is actually constantly moving. It's a real material in the environment, and the same can be said for a lot of the other materials that we see. Games like Quantum Break and Uncharted 4 on the PlayStation 4, I think, are representative of the potential, the power that developers can tap into when they, really have the resources to make sure that they're getting the most out of these next generation platforms. Like, seriously, name something on PC that looks as good as Quantum Break, apart from Quantum Break. There are games, no doubt, but they have to be ran on some extremely expensive rigs. So I appreciate the effort and time that went into Quantum Break looking as amazing as it does. And a lot of people, I think, have out there been saying, regarding Quantum Break, that it's the launch game that the Xbox One and Xbox One owners deserved, and I agree. Had this game come out at launch, I can guarantee the Xbox One would have sold significantly more than it did. But either way, I'm happy that we got our hands on it eventually, and I'm extremely impressed with its overall presentation from an audio-visual perspective. Which is just insane, man. It makes me really want like an Alan Wake game or a Max Payne game, running in this engine, because it's so ridiculously impressive. So, shinies out of the way. We got to talk about the story, right? The story, obviously, a really significant element and part of the Quantum Break experience. And it's delivered in a lot of different ways. You have the cutscenes that are really straightforward, character interaction. You have the narration of main character. Jack Joyce does a lot of self-narration, which is, again, sort of a staple of Remedy games. Max Payne and Alan Wake both had narration from the main characters. And I think, if you're someone who's played a lot of Remedy games, you've played Alan Wake, you've played Max Payne, that narration from the main character feels very comfortable, There's sort of an element of nostalgia to it. And it allows Remedy to use it as a tool, a tool to really emotionally involve the player. And I did. I loved every single second of Jack Joyce's self-narration. It's just something about a game delivering the story in that aspect that feels really satisfying. I don't know what it is, man. It's just one of those things that only Remedy seems to be able to do, and it definitely was a big plus for me. And of course, like I said, the main story, the actual animated cuts, or I should say the cutscenes, which were all in-game, which were fully mocapped. We have to remember that they've taken real actors and they've basically just mocapped them and put them directly into the game. We have Shawn Ashmore playing Jack Joyce, of course. And I was a little bit concerned, when you start using real actors, you then have to compensate for the fact that people recognize this individual, his visual appearance, as Shawn Ashmore. That's kind of, one of the things that video games are able to get away with, is that often they can just create the likeness of someone that most people haven't seen. For example, Sam Lake in Max Payne. But I never for once was sitting there like, oh, Shawn Ashmore. No, I was like, Jack Joyce. This is Jack Joyce. So a huge props to Shawn Ashmore for doing an amazing performance, mocap-wise, as Jack Joyce. And the same can be said for all of the other characters. His brother, and I don't want to ruin any of their characters for you guys. But they were all just incredibly well done. And the level of detail in the facial animations, the overall just gestures and the animations of the characters is, I think, some of the best we've ever seen. Undoubtedly, some of the best we've ever seen. It definitely avoids the uncanny valley and just goes straight to awesome. Goes 100% straight to awesome. So huge props with all of that and how that was done. I just never felt like there was a moment where any of the characters, even some of the odd side characters that you run into, a couple of them definitely there for comic relief, I never felt like they fell short. They never felt out of place. They always felt just really well realized, developed, and alive. And that definitely helped me stay hooked on the experience. It helped me stay involved. So I think the last thing we need to talk about, of course, was one of the big sort of selling points for Quantum Break when it first got announced. And that was the idea that they were going to do a live-action television series within the game. And that does exist. There's 3 episodes. They're 20 minutes apiece. And I watched all of them. They're completely skippable. You don't have to watch them. And they don't, they're not required. If you don't watch them, it's not like you're going to play the rest of the game and be at a loss for what happened. In fact, I believe that while you're initially watching them, up until the point until you finish the game, they may actually create additional confusion for some people. Because, you know, they're telling a story within a story involving some of the characters that you're seeing develop within the regular game. And that may confuse some people. But at the end of the day, when the game wraps up, it adds to the experience and it all makes sense. And I'm really genuinely happy I sat down and watched each of those 20-minute live-action TV episodes. They were actually really good. You know, they hooked me. And they definitely had some cliffhangers, which of course is a great incentive to be like, okay, I'll definitely watch the next one because I want to know what happens to that character next. I think it was a great way to further develop some of the less focused characters in the game. You know, the character that you see for like, you know, 10 or 15 minutes, you don't really know what his story is. Well, you're probably going to learn about him in that live action TV series. I really dug that. It was awesome. It was unexpectedly awesome. A part of me was like, oh man, you know, it's Remedy. I'll give him this one. We're going to find out if it's any good, but I don't know about this. But I was really happy with it in the end. I really was. I think the first episode starts off a little rough. It's a little corny. But after that, it's all just great, man. Really great performances and delivery from the actors and the characters. And like I said, it just added to the experience. If you haven't played the game and you plan on picking it up in the future, I strongly recommend watching each of those 20-minute episodes. Maybe use it as an opportunity to take a break, grab a snack and a drink in between your play sessions because it was absolutely worth it at the end of the day. And that's really the final piece of the puzzle, isn't it? I think we've talked about everything at this point. You know, closing words, I played through the entire Quantum Break experience in 2 sit-downs, 2 play sessions. The first play session was about 90% of the game, actually. I was up till 4 in the morning on Tuesday at the point in which I wanted to keep playing, but I was falling asleep in my chair. I was starting to feel really exhausted, and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to fully comprehend the remainder of the experience, so I put it down and I finished it the following day. And man, it was just, yeah, you know, I think I enjoyed it even more when it was all said and done. You know, you're dealing with some of the smaller issues in the game, like the gunplay and stuff while you're playing, but when it all wraps up, you kind of sit there, you sit back, and you're like, yeah, man, that was good. You know, that put a smile on my face. Well done. You know, I clapped, actually, when I finished it. By the way, if you do finish it, you should watch after the cutscenes, because there's a sort of sting. But I genuinely clapped. I sat there and I was like, bravo, Remedy. Bravo, man. You really put a smile on my face. You genuinely did. An unexpected smile. Because there were seriously moments when I was playing the game, a few moments, especially early on, when I was really dealing with the gunplay and being frustrated, where I questioned whether or not I was going to be able to enjoy the entire game. You know, whether or not the story was going to be enough, the overall presentation was going to be enough to, you know, to get me hooked. And it was like an hour later, you know, 4 hours into the experience where I'm just like, oh, yep, all the doubts have been wiped away. I'm on for the ride. Let's do this. I recommend it. At the end of the day, the best thing I can say, you know, no silly rating scales or anything like that. Would I recommend this game to another person? Yes. If you like story-driven experiences, if you appreciate anything Remedy has done in the past, if you played Alan Wake, if you played Max Payne, you owe it to yourself to experience Quantum Break. It will easily be added to your list of memorable experiences, without a doubt. And I have to say that I very much hope, much like I hope for the future of Alan Wake with Remedy, that we see quite a bit more from the future of Quantum Break. And that's also one thing, small thing to note. When you're playing the game, I would take your time. Keep an eye out. There's quite a few Easter eggs, especially in relation to Alan Wake, that were welcome as a fan of that franchise, that I think are going to put a huge smile on your face. That's it, though, guys. That is Quantum Break, man. I loved it. All in all, negatives aside, I loved it from beginning to end, and I'm actually very much looking forward to playing it again. I think in a lot of ways, this is a game for me that, much like Half-Life 2, I look forward to going back and playing every now and then. You know, Half-Life 2 is one of those games that every couple of years I go back and I replay in my free time. And I think Quantum Break, much like Alan Wake, will fall into that same situation and scenario. And hopefully I'll enjoy it even more the second time around. If you have any questions for me, any thoughts or impressions of your own regarding Quantum Break, please try and keep them spoiler-free for the sake of others who probably or may not have played the game just yet. Throw them down in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next one.